In the Pure Culture Techniques lab, you looked at the bad guys, the organisms that were contaminating our foods. In this lab, we want to turn it around and take a look at the good guys. As you can see in this image, the microorganisms that are responsible for making the delectable foods that we eat. The objective for this lab is to research and also to understand the role of microbes in food production. Bacteria and fungi have long been used to control spoilage of food. For example, milk, through controlled spoilage actually by bacteria, can be converted to such good things as buttermilk, yogurt, cheese, sour cream, and cottage cheese. And all of these are different microbial fermentations. Fruit juices, for example, can be fermented to wine. Yeast and bacteria are involved in this process. Grains can be fermented to bread and to beer. Yeast and bacteria can be involved in these processes. Nearly every food that we consume does have some microbial connection. Even if the food isn't made directly with the help of microbes, there are industrial processes that exploit microbes to make vitamins and food supplements. So the vitamin tablets that you take in the morning, all of those vitamins come to you, or nearly all of them come from microbial processes. Amino acids that are added to our foods, as well as foods that are consumed by pets and also livestock, are going to come through industrial processes. Microorganisms primarily use fermentation, which converts substrates to products. So a material is going to be fermented to a product. Grape juice will be fermented to alcohol and carbon dioxide in wine production. Take a look at this YouTube video to understand the process of fermentation. So let's take a look at wine as an example of a microbial product. Wine will first undergo what is called the primary fermentation. Red wines and white wines are made slightly differently. Red wine is going to be made from the must, or the pulp, of red or black grapes, and fermentation occurs together with the grape skins, which gives the wine its color. The skins can be left on for varying periods of time. The longer the skins are left on, the more tannic or bitey the wine is. Tannin is a difficult thing to describe, but if you think about eating a green banana, sort of that taste that you get along the side of your tongue, that's from tannins. And tannins are something that we like to mellow out in red wines, so this is one reason that red wines are aged a lot longer than white wines are. White wines are made by fermenting juice, which is made by pressing crushed grapes. The skins are removed, so the skins no longer play any further role. To make white wine, you can either use white grapes or red grapes. For a blush wine, such as a white Zinfandel, for example, that is pinkish in color, the Zinfandel grape is used and the skins are kept on for a short period of time. Once the must then has been created, yeast will be added. You remember this yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. You've got a chance to look at it in lab. It's added to the juice, and then it's allowed to ferment the sugars, fructose, in the grapes for about 1 to 2 weeks. In this process of fermentation, ethanol is produced, that's ethyl alcohol, and carbon dioxide. It's important that an anaerobic environment is maintained during this fermentation. Anaerobic environment is going to drive fermentation. It's going to allow the yeast to express the genes necessary to make the enzymes to ferment the grape juice. It's also going to inhibit organisms that are not anaerobic from growing in the wine and spoiling it. Carbon dioxide is allowed to bubble off if a still wine is being produced, such as a Cabernet or a Riesling, but the carbon dioxide can be retained if a sparkling wine or a champagne is desired. After the primary fermentation is done, secondary fermentation and aging will take place, and it's a different process for red wines than white wines. During the secondary fermentation and aging process, fermentation continues very slowly for 3 to 6 months. The wine is going to be kept under an airlock to prevent the wine from oxidation. Oxidation is an undesirable product that can happen if oxygen is introduced into the tank, and you'll know if your red wine has been oxidized After you pour it, tip your glass slightly to the side, and if the rim of the wine, the edge of the wine looks brown, you know that the wine hasn't been stored properly. Perhaps the cork is bad, perhaps it wasn't made correctly, but it has been oxidized and it won't have as pleasant of a taste. Lactic acid bacteria will be added to the primary ferment. This can happen in stainless steel vats or in barrels, depending upon how the wine is to be aged. And these lactic acid bacteria are going to metabolize malic acid and produce lactic acid and carbon dioxide. These lactic acid bacteria are sometimes just simply present on the grape skins, and other winemakers will actually add them to the vat. These lactic acid bacteria include Lactobacillus, Leuconostoc, Pediococcus, Lactococcus, and Streptococcus. All red wines go through complete malolactic fermentation, and this is done to lessen the acidity of the wine and also to remove the possibility that malolactic fermentation will occur after the wine has been bottled. If that happens, then carbon dioxide would be produced and the bottle could explode. It's a little different with white wines. They vary in the use of malolactic fermentation during their making. Lighter aromatic wines, such as German Rieslings, generally do not go through malolactic fermentation. Fuller white wines, such as barrel-fermented Chardonnays, are more commonly put through malolactic fermentation. Malolactic fermentation is going to give more of a buttery feel or buttery taste to the white wines that undergo it. It's a very specific flavor in the wine. And take a look, if you buy a Chardonnay, see how it's been fermented and see if it's undergone malolactic fermentation. So for the assignment, you are going to create 3 meals. Each meal is going to have a beverage, and each component of your meal is going to be created by a microorganism. You need a minimum of 3 foods in each meal. Anything above the 3 is going to be bonus points. The beverage and the food must be made via a microbial process. I've given you a list of foods made by microbial processes on Blackboard. Each meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, must have 1 food that's created by an industrial process, and a list of industrial products can be found on Blackboard. You'll want to have a dessert with lunch or dinner or both. The foods can't be repeated, but the microbes involved may be repeated. For example, you can't have yogurt for breakfast and then frozen yogurt for dessert at dinner, but you can have different types of cheeses or breads. For example, sourdough bread is going to be made with a different process than white bread. Each meal must be palatable, something you would serve your family or friends. Don't give me olives and pickles and coffee for my lunch. That's not very palatable. Even though all 3 of those are produced by microbial processes, that really wouldn't taste very good. Don't forget that the genus and the species are going to be underlined or italicized. Genus is going to be capitalized, species is lowercase. Because this is a very involved assignment, please type this. No handwritten submissions will be accepted. You can download this from Blackboard and type directly on it and then print it. Here's an example. Let's say for lunch I'm going to have a pepperoni roll, a tossed salad with blue cheese dressing, and a glass of wine. Believe it or not, there are at least 7 microbial processes in this meal. You only need 3. So the other 4 would be bonus. Let's take a look at the pepperoni roll. It's made with Italian bread, pepperoni, and mozzarella cheese. All 3 of these are created by microbial fermentations. The blue cheese dressing on my salad contains vinegar and blue cheese. Again, both created by microbial fermentations. The wine is fermented grape juice. And finally, the industrial process would be pectinase. Wine often has pectin in it. Pectin is a carbohydrate that's very commonly found in fruits, but it will make the wine cloudy. Pectinase, an enzyme, can be added to clarify the wine. The pectinase is actually extracted from another microorganism called Aspergillus niger. It's a mold. The pectinase can be extracted from the mold and then added into the wine in order to get rid of the cloudiness. So you can see on the table, the food I'm having is Cabernet wine. The substrate would be the sugars from the grape juice. The chef's organisms involved here are Saccharomyces cerevisiae and the lactic acid bacteria Lactobacillus, Leuconostoc, Pediococcus, Lactococcus, and Streptococcus. And the process is that Saccharomyces ferments the juice to alcohol and carbon dioxide in the primary fermentation. The lactic acid bacteria continue the secondary fermentation of malic acid to lactic acid. Good luck on this assignment. It's a little bit more involved than some of the other assignments that you've done, and feel free to ask me questions, send me an email, ask me to check over your menu. I certainly would be happy to do that. Good luck!